Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem Chevra, we're going to go over a Torah that's associated with this week's Parsha. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Akev, what we find is a discussion, a promise, an orientation towards Eretz Yisrael, the secret of Eretz Yisrael. The secret of Eretz Yisrael being the fact that Le'echol mipirio l'spoa mituva, that why did Moshe Rabbeinu ultimately want to come into Eretz Yisrael? One of the reasons is because he wanted to partake and he wanted to eat of the fruit of the land. That ein davar gadol, there's no thing greater than being a human being on the ground, face to face with reality, in the land of Eretz Yisrael. And really, the entirety of the Torah surrounds around this particular inyan of the path towards Eretz Yisrael, the arrival in Eretz Yisrael, and the experience of Eretz Yisrael. Now, there's two ways of grasping the notion of Eretz Yisrael. Prior to the actual arrival in the land of Eretz Yisrael, where it becomes something physical. The miracle of Eretz Yisrael is that it's something physical, something that we really do not find so often in the Torah HaKadosha, where we celebrate an object, we celebrate something as being inherently holy. We have that with Tashmishe Kedusha, we have that with Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah. But the land of Eretz Yisrael itself, the externality of the world, takes on a certain shape of holiness, which is remarkable because very often Klal Yisrael is a religion that sanctifies time. Shabbos, Yantif, Kadesh Hazmanim. We don't find the sanctification of place so much. Other religions of the world sanctify place. They have a homeland, a motherland. The notion of Eretz Yisrael Mamish, the notion of Binyan Beis HaMikdash, the notion of Har HaBayis, Har Moriah, Kotel HaMa'aravi, Makom HaAron, Kodesh HaKadoshim, these places, the miracle of this are that they are real places. They're real things. A person can walk on them. So obviously the ikar is, and there's no denying it, the ikar is really entering into the land of Eretz Yisrael Mamish. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to do. That's what Ve'eschanan was all about. But be that as it may, there's going to be a time in every person's life prior to their arrival in the actuality of the land of Eretz Yisrael. And it doesn't mean that a person can't access Eretz Yisrael. It just means that a person has to draw down the avira of Eretz Yisrael, the air of Eretz Yisrael, the climate of Eretz Yisrael, to wherever they are sitting. Rebbe Nachman writes in Torah Mem Beis, in the first volume of Likutei Moharan, that the first Rashi in the Torah tells us something fundamental. That the reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Torah and expresses in the Torah the secret of the creation of the world is because Koach Ma'asav Higad Liyamo Latet Lahem Nachlas Goyim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu owns the land. The land belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the land to he who he sees fit. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the ratzon to take it and to give it, and no one else owns the land. And anytime the nations of the world come and claim, listim atem, you guys are thieves, it's our land, what we meant to remember is the fact that, no, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's land. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives that land to us when we're deserving of that land. And Rebbe Nachman says, Koach Ma'asav Higad Liyamo, the secret of Koach, the secret of strength. What's Koach Ma'asav? Koach Ma'asav is the 14 elements of the hand. Each finger, other than the thumb, has 3 kind of knuckle points on it. The thumb has 2 knuckle points on it. So 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14, which is the gematria of Yad, which is each hand is Yad. And Koach Ma'asav, when you clap your hands and you take the 14 and the 14 and you bring them together, you create Koach. And Rebbe Nachman says that when a person finds themselves in Eretz Ha'amim, when a person finds themselves removed from the land, what they need to do is clap azoi to awaken within themselves that recognition that I can draw down the air of Eretz Yisrael, the avira of Eretz Yisrael, and transform where I am sitting into a place of Eretz Yisrael mamish. So while the ikar is to be in Eretz Yisrael, nevertheless, as Rebbe Nachman taught us, Kol makom she'ani holech, ani holech rak le'Eretz Yisrael. Every place that I walk, I am walking only towards Eretz Yisrael. And so, when we're prior to being in Eretz Yisrael, the job is to cultivate the mindset of Eretz Yisrael. And so what we're going to read in Rebbe Nachman right now is true about Eretz Yisrael Mamish, and it's also true about every experience in a person's life. Every experience in a person's life, as we're going to see in this Torah, goes through a 3-stage process that Rebbe Nachman is going to describe as being something that applies to the land of Eretz Yisrael, and we'll go through the Torah and then we'll abstract it back into our life. Yeah? Good? Seder. Zakt the Heilige Rebbe. Siper, he told over the story, meaning these are words that Rabbi Nassan heard from Rebbe Nachman, that Rebbe Nachman heard from Rebbe Nachman, and he's giving it over right now in the form of something that Rebbe Nachman had told over. Siper, Keshahaya be'Eretz Yisrael, when Rabbeinu arrived in Eretz Yisrael, and we know Rabbeinu's trip to Eretz Yisrael was a life-changing process. He decided to throw himself into the lowest imaginable places for somebody of his spiritual status, only in order to be meritorious of the light of Eretz Yisrael. He said his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, tried to enter into Eretz Yisrael, as we know from the story of the Shvi Shal Pesach journey, but in the end of the day, he was forced to turn around. Why? Because Eretz Yisrael represents godless shebegodless, the greatness of greatness, the apex of what it means to be a human being in this world. Body and soul unified, connection between the spiritual and the physical, the Shemayim and the Aretz kissing together. And in order to merit the godless shebegodless, the greatness of greatness, one must first traverse the hellish path of the katnus shebekatnus, the smallness within smallness. And Zok Rebbe Nachman, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, whatever this means, was not ready to go through that process of the smallness of smallness, and therefore he didn't merit to enter into the greatness of greatness, which is Eretz Yisrael. But I'm willing to go through this process of the smallness of smallness, and as a result of that, I'm meritorious of grasping the greatness of greatness. Now, obviously, anything that Rebbe Nachman was able to do is simply because of the path that was paved by the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. And so it's not really a stira, because he's not saying he's better than the Baal Shem Tov Chas v'Shalom. He's saying that he's growing and expressing something the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh wasn't able to express. But nevertheless, the entrance into Eretz Yisrael is dependent upon katnus shebekatnus. And so when Rebbe Nachman finally arrived in the wacky story of the Mesiras Nefesh and the dressing up like it was Purim the entire journey with nobody knowing who he was except some infant child who looked at him and said, "You're a Gitti Yid," and that was the only person who really understood the secret of Rebbe Nachman the entire journey. Rebbe Nachman arrives in Eretz Yisrael, and he says, once I walked 4 amos there, I received what I needed to receive. He stuck around a little bit more. The secret of Rebbe Nachman is that he was able to enter into Eretz Yisrael. So Siper, when I was in Eretz Yisrael, Keshahaya be'Eretz Yisrael, Sipru lo, Sham hachashuvim shahayu sham. He was speaking to the important people who were around there then, and they would say that Shaba'u me bedinas elu, they came from other countries, the kavu dirasam sham, and they established their homes in Eretz Yisrael, kimefursam, as is known, the siprulo, and they told him, these olim, they told him, shakodem shahaya be'eretz Yisrael, lo hayu yecholim letzayer la'atzmam she'eretz Yisrael hi omedes b'zeh olam. That prior to their arrival in Eretz Yisrael, it was impossible for them to imagine within their minds that the land of Israel was an actual place in this world. So the first stage of Eretz Yisrael is prior to arriving at Eretz Yisrael. Prior to being in Eretz Yisrael, looking at Eretz Yisrael it's an idealized vision. Eretz Yisrael is something so real, so powerful, that it couldn't be real. It was too lofty to be real. They actually thought that Eretz Yisrael was a different reality. It was a different planet. Based on the profound levels of holiness that are described with regards to Eretz Yisrael, as explained in the books, as it is understood and explained clearly in our holy Torah, ma'alas kedushas Eretz Yisrael, the holiness of the land of Israel, kama v'kama pa'amim, we see it over and over and over again. V'haTorah ba'atzma mefareshes kol gvulei Eretz Yisrael l'godel ma'alasa v'kedushasa ha'atzim v'hanayra mo'ed mo'ed. And the Torah itself not only describes the greatness of Eretz Yisrael, but it goes into great detail of the barriers and the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael to inform how significant and how profound this lofty place is. Al kain lo hayu yecholim l'tzayer la'atzmam be'eineihem she'eretz Yisrael yiyeh b'zeh ha'olam. To the degree that it was impossible for them to actually imagine that Eretz Yisrael existed. So that's the first stage, Eretz Yisrael as an ideal. That notion of arriving at a particular place where everything is going to be okay. That place of calmness, that place of menucha, that place of olam haba. And prior to getting there, a person imagines that it is so powerful, it is so potent, that there's no way that I'll ever get there. That's the first stage of Eretz Yisrael. Then starts the second stage, Ad Asher Ba'u L'Sham. Ad Asher Ba'u L'Sham is when we arrive in Eretz Yisrael. When a person arrives in Eretz Yisrael, and they're ready to meet this tremendous illusion that they assume is going to happen, this fantasy of what the land represents, And suddenly what they first and foremost encounter is a profound moment of disillusion, of disappointment, of not getting what I expected to get. Ad sheba asher ba'u l'sham, once they arrive there, v'ra'u she'eretz Yisrael hu bazeh ha'olam mamish. It turns out that Eretz Yisrael is in fact very, very much part of this world. Ki be'emes Eretz Yisrael hu kamo medinos elu mamish. Because in truth, in the reality of things, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is exactly like all of these other countries that we just left. The Afar Eretz Yisrael, hu b'mare v'dmus kamo afar medinos elu mamish. And the dust and the stones of Eretz Yisrael appear in their form to be exactly like the dust and the stones of those other countries. And sometimes they'll bring special dirt that looks different in Eretz Yisrael, white sand. Zehu rak b'makomos pratim. This is only specific parts of the country. V'gam b'medina zu nimtza afar lavan v'afar shel neitar b'kama makomos. And you could also find those things in other countries as well. Aval ikar ha'afar be'Eretz Yisrael, but the main dust of Eretz Yisrael, hukamo afar medinos elu mamish. Everything is exactly the same. Ki be'emes b'dmus u'b'tmuna ein chiluk klal bein Eretz Yisrael u'bein shar ha'medinos lahavdil. Because at first glance, there appears to actually be no difference whatsoever. That first I have this illusion and this fantasy of what Eretz Yisrael is going to be. And again, Eretz Yisrael could be anything. It could be the mindset of recovery. It could be the mindset of spiritual capacity. I imagine that if I were to only enter into that place, everything would be good. And all of the things that I need, all of the things that I search for, all of the things that I yearn for are all hidden in that place. And then a person arrives and they're disillusioned because they realize that, oh my goodness, I'm still the same. It's all the same here. The thing that I thought would answer all of the questions, the thing that I thought would answer all of the problems, in fact, turns out to be just like everywhere else. There's a famous story I heard from Rav Ephraim Waxman a long time ago. I don't know the makor, but it was a story about, I believe it was about Rebbe Nachman, but it was quoted as one of the tzaddikim that after going through this long journey of Eretz Yisrael, of trying to get to Eretz Yisrael, they finally get to Eretz Yisrael. And suddenly he hears his Yetzer Hara speaking to him. He hears his Malach Ra speaking to him. And he says suddenly, wait a second, Yetzer Hara, how are you with me here? How are you with me here in Eretz Yisrael? And the Yetzer Hara responds, he says, who do you think got you here? Who do you think got you here? What do you think we were doing all along? It was the Yetzer that brought you here. That illusion, that fantasy that you'll finally find that sipuk that you're looking for, that's what got you here. And now you're here and you come to realize that it's like any other place. So that's the second stage in spiritual development and the path towards Eretz Yisrael. First, there's the illusion, the fantasy, that it's going to be the perfect thing in the world. And then there's the necessary stage of disillusionment when I encounter the real thing and I realize that, wait a second, this is exactly like every other place. And God forbid, if a person was waiting and expecting to feel something incredible and to find spiritual illumination and to see the clear difference very clearly, so then when they arrive in Eretz Yisrael, they're going to say, well, this is not it. This is not what I was hoping for. And a person can turn their backs on the spiritual goal because it doesn't provide them with that good feeling that they were seeking. So that's the second stage. First, there's the expectation, the infantile desire and fantasy that Eretz Yisrael is going to be this perfect solution. And then there's the necessary stage of maturation, which is the moment of disillusion, where I come to realize that, wait a second, this is a country like any other country. This is a land like any other land. And then Rebbe Nachman brings in the third phrase, V'afal pikein, but nevertheless, Hi kadosha ma'od ma'od b'tachlis ha'kedusha atzuma v'noira ma'od. In spite of the fact that it appears to be the same, in spite of the fact that there seems to be a profound level of disappointment associated with the feeling or the spiritual insight that I expect to feel when I arrive at that imagined destination, in spite of all of the equality between this place and any other place, and in spite of all of the disillusionment and the realization and the reality that this place is like any other place on earth, hidden within that, within the patience and the acceptance of that disappointment, is this secret of va'afal pikein, but nevertheless, Hi kedusha ma'od ma'od betachlis hakedusha atzuma v'noira ma'od. It is the fullest expression of holiness, in the strongest form in which holiness can be revealed, and a terrifyingly great expression of holiness. Ashrei hazoicha lahaluich sham afilu arba amos v'chulei. Praiseworthy is he who gets to walk there even arba amos. Ka'asher hifligu rabosenu zachornam lebracha v'chol hasvarim ba'oitzem kedushasa hagadoyla v'hanoira'a. So Rebbe Nachman just revealed to us the three-step process of really any spiritual process. There is the necessary stage of illusionment, where I convince myself that if only I grasp this spiritual grasp, everything will be good. I set my soul towards the heart of the sun, and I run towards Eretz Yisrael in the hopes that this is going to be that secret place that exists beyond this world. And then comes the second stage, that necessary stage of disillusionment, where I come to terms with the fact that I thought this was going to be where I found my spiritual comfort, and it turns out that I'm still feeling as spiritually uncomfortable as I was before. And it's at that moment that a person undergoes that space, whether they're going to choose to say, to heck with the whole thing because I'm not feeling what I thought I was feeling, or a person is going to choose to enter into the mindset of emunah, which says that even though I don't feel what I thought I was going to feel, even though I'm not experiencing the spiritual bliss, nevertheless, I have emunah that this is the place that I'm going to find my comfort. And again, Eretz Yisrael here is an example. If a person convinces themselves, I'm going to push myself to go daven with a minyan, and a person says that if I go daven with a minyan, that's going to give me that feeling of spiritual connection that I so desire. And then a person pushes themselves and gets themselves to go daven with a minyan, only to find that davening with a minyan is as spiritually defeating as not davening with a minyan in their minds. It doesn't provide them with any additional feeling. It doesn't illuminate their soul in the way that they expected that revelation to take place. And the first gesture that a person experiences at that moment is to turn towards the door. If what I thought I would find is not here, then why would I stay here? But it's the secret third level, which is the persistence and the acceptance of the disappointment and the willingness and the self-sacrifice to stay there in spite of the disappointment, to do what I need to do and to pretend that the thing that I've been searching is here all along. Only then does a person come to understand the true difference between Eretz Yisrael and the rest of the world. You guys with me? Zokt Rebbe Nachman. Besipe Rabbeinu Zachronan Lebracha Zois. The reason that Rebbe Nachman told this over, says Rebbe Nosson, Kihu inyan nitzrach ma'oid lakam inyanim. This awareness and the ability to understand the fact that just because the spiritual ideal doesn't feel like anything, and it feels like it's just old plain news, nevertheless, I need to persevere with the acceptance that in spite of the fact that it doesn't feel any different, nevertheless, it is fundamentally different. And I'm not necessarily going to feel that difference, but I'm the one who has the ability to believe in the difference. And that makes all the difference. And so this is not just with regards to Eretz Yisrael, this is true in anything that a person does. And this is something that human beings struggle with very much. There's a mistaken perception when it comes to what spirituality looks like. Most of us assume that it's going to feel like something different, powerful, real, feeling, experiential, undeniable. And in truth, a person will wait their whole life for that to happen if they think that's what needs to happen. Kiyesh toim soivrim, there are mistaken ways of thinking that hold. Shetzrichim lahakir es hatzadik o shar davar bekedusha lahakiro befanav betzalmo udmuso sheyem meshuna bedmuso b'tnuosav dafka. That most people think that when it comes to grasping the tzaddik, when it comes to grasping anything holy, that one must identify in a clear way the difference. One must see clearly the spiritual potency there. There must be an external difference. That this thing represents its true spirituality. Eretz Yisrael must be different. Sobriety must be different. The experience of mindfulness must be different. And that's very often that anticipation and that idealization is what helps us drive ourselves to get to that place. And we assume that we're going to see a big difference. Ube'emes lo kenhu. But says Rebbe Nosson, in the name of Rebbe Nachman, in truth, that's not the case. For something to be spiritual illuminating doesn't mean that it will feel any different whatsoever from what you're doing. Because when it comes to the tzaddikim, they have the same body as any other person. And they have the same physical needs as any other person. And in the end of the day, it's the same chesronos in the end of the day as any other person. And so too with any other element of spirituality. There's no clear difference. But nevertheless, nevertheless, it's completely different. How is it completely different if it's the same? Because I see that it's the same, I have to dig down deep in order to come to terms with believing in the difference. And that's what makes all the difference. And in truth, nobody looks like the tzaddik, even though externally the tzaddik looks exactly like every other person. And this goes for every Jew in relationship to every other person from the nations of the world, says the Meshilach. Moshe Amar Rabbeinu Zal. Rabbeinu Zal explained already that there's a true difference, even though you can't see it. She'ish hakasher nidma shahoilech im kirachashos v'dakin kemoshar b'nei adam. It appears that the tzaddik, that people are connected, are walking around carrying the same things as every other person. V'afal pikenu inin acher lagamrei. But in the end of the day, in truth, that life is a totally different life. The Chazon Ish has a beautiful letter where he says the person who learns Torah, the person who contemplates Torah, nidmek kibnei adam. They appear to be walking amongst men like men, but in truth, they're kemalachei Elokim. They're like a celestial being whose mind is completely attached to another world. And while everybody else is stuck in the concealment of the world, their mind is open to Gan Eden. There's no apparent difference. It feels the exact same. By choosing to know the difference, that's where I come to believe in the difference. I come to believe in the difference. Zakt Rebbe Nachman. Eretz Yisrael. So too when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. Be'emes hi muvdeles u'mufreshes l'gamrei meshar artzos b'chol inyano u'b'chinaso. Avada Eretz Yisrael is completely different in all of its aspects and in all of its spiritual qualities. Nevertheless, it appears exactly the same. V'amar Rabbeinu Zal. She'eretz Yisrael yeshlo rekia acher mishar ha'artzos. In truth, in spite of the fact that it looks like it's the same sky, there's a completely different sky in the land of Israel. Kamuvan beZohar HaKadosh Parsas Truma, as it is explained in the Zohar HaKadosh and Parsas Truma. Ach afal pikein, but nevertheless, begashmius, and according to the physical reality, lefi mare einei ha'adam, and the way that the mind perceives things, ein roim shum shinoi bein Eretz Yisrael l'shar artzos. Again, there's apparently no difference. Ki im misha zoche laha'amin b'kedushasa. The secret difference is someone who chooses to believe in the holiness. Yochol lahavchin ktsasa hefresh. If you believe in the difference, then you can come to understand a little bit of the difference. Kamokein hatzadik va'anashim haksherim la'erech shar ha'olam. So too, when it comes to the people of the tzaddik, the people who are connected to the tzaddik, in truth, they appear like anybody else. They're anonymous. There's no clear distinction with regards to who they are. And if you were to line them up, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But nevertheless, in accordance with the truth of truth, we believe that it's completely separate and apart. Because to be someone who's connected to the tzaddik is a completely separate thing. All the more so when it comes to the true tzaddikim. And this notion is necessary for a number of things. And a person must understand this very clearly. A person must understand this very clearly. And so the MS is that this idea is fundamental. It's fundamental to spiritual processing. It's fundamental to any type of relationship that a person has. That we, by definition, carry with ourselves preconceived notions and expectations with regards to how things are going to look and how we idealize things. And the idealization of the mind is looking towards where we would like to get to. And then we place the best qualities upon that thing which only drives our urgency to get there. This is true with the Yetzer Hara and it's true with the Yetzer Tov. Yetzer hara magnifies what that thing is going to do for us until we arrive at that thing, and then it reveals itself to be totally, totally empty, and that it doesn't make a difference whatsoever. And so too in holiness, a person expects that there's going to be fireworks and lights and action that's going to make it fundamentally clear to me that I have left the old path and got on the new path. That's the typical assumption of human experience, that when I shift course and I go from outside of Eretz Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael, I'm going to see a clear and present difference, that I will be able to have that blockchain authentication. I will be able to have proof, certification that I have now entered into the good place. But what Rebbe Nachman is pointing out is that that type of reasoning is faulty. Because in truth, with that type of reasoning, I am going to face disappointment. Disappointment means that I made an appointment. I had an appointed way of experience that I assumed would happen. I set that appointment in my mind. And then when it comes to try and reach that appointment, I come to realize that it's not like that. And that's the birthplace of disappointment. Had I not developed the previous expectation, there would have been no room for the incoming resentment. As they say in rooms, they say that I've come to understand very simply that more acceptance equals more serenity, more expectation equals more resentment. And it's normal to idealize. It's normal to say, if only I got there, this, that, or the other thing will be better. And it's very important for a person to have a clear idea of what they're hoping to see in their spiritual work. But we also have to be very certain that when we develop the ideals that we want for ourselves in our lives, that we not get caught up in the all too natural infantile desire for them to be magical, for them to be incredible, for them to be beyond anything that I've ever imagined before. Because in truth, it's like any other experience. Eretz Yisrael is a land like any other land. And in that place, in that Pagisha, where my idealized vision of things hits the ground of reality, very often that's where Yesh comes in. Yesh comes in when I convince myself I'll work hard to get to the place that I want to get to because of the reward that I know waits for me in the place that I get to. And then when I get there and I don't experience that reward, all too often the mind says, forget this. I might as well go back to the thing that I was experiencing before. But what Rebbe Nachman is saying, that with just a little patience and acceptance, which Rebbe Nachman calls faith, I come to see how in truth, this reality, this new reality, is entirely different than the previous way of living. This aspect of Eretz Yisrael, this aspect of freedom, this aspect of clarity and light, is a completely, completely separate thing entirely. Completely. And that demands patience, and that demands a willingness to experience that disappointment, to experience that. For example, in the recovery communities, they have a notion of the pink cloud phenomenon. What's the pink cloud phenomenon? The pink cloud phenomenon is that very often a person, after some early stages in sobriety, will come to a place of thinking that, wow, sobriety is the greatest thing that I've ever imagined in my life. I can't believe that I've never done this before. I can't believe how blind I was to keeping myself stuck in those old behaviors, thinking that that's where the light was. How come nobody ever revealed to me the secret blessings of recovery? This is all I want to do. I wish I did it earlier, etc., etc. And then very often, a couple of weeks in, that mindset shifts, and a person either falls or is on the brink of falling. And so we warn about the pink cloud phenomenon. Why? It's not that a person can't feel good about their spiritual work. It's not that a person can't feel good about the developments that they make in their lives. It's simply that we cannot become dependent, and we cannot allow our wellness to be contingent upon feeling it. Because if I say that it's only recovery, or it's only light, if it's this loud, exciting experience, so then when I don't feel that way, I'm going to say, oh, I've lost it. And then I'll treat myself as if I've lost it. When in reality, Kedusha expresses itself specifically in the Kol Demama Daka Yishama, in the hidden, still, small voice that is present in the ordinary day-to-day process of things. The secret light of being a person in Eretz Yisrael, the secret light of being a person in a process of healing, is the ordinariness, the extraordinary light of ordinary events. Lo berash. It's not going to be incredible because no matter what I'm looking at in Eretz Yisrael, I can find that elsewhere. It's only when I attune my inner ear to realize that even the traffic and the garbage in Eretz Yisrael is fundamentally different than anything else in the rest of the world. But that's only with the emunah in Eretz Yisrael. That's only with the true faith in the land and the faith in the spiritual experience that is higher than the experience of it. It's like the Heilige Kutzker, when the Chassid left the Kutzker. When the Chassid left the Kutzker, and this is something I feel every time I leave Eretz Yisrael and I go to Chutz La'aretz and then I come back, that the Chassid left the Kutzker on Sukkot in order to go to another Chassidus. And when he came back, his Rebbe, the Kutzker, said to him, where did you go? And he said, I went there. And the Kutzker Rebbe said, why did he go there? And he says, over there they see the Ushpizin. They see Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David. They see. And I went to see. And the Kutzker laughed and he said, big deal. Over there they see, here we believe. Meaning to say that the belief in the Kedusha is to a certain degree higher than the experience and the actualization of that Kedusha, because when I believe in the Kedusha, I'm saying that I don't even need to feel it in order for it to be real. It's real because it's real, not because I'm aware of it being real. It's real because I've chosen to believe it's real. And there the true difference emerges. There's an anonymity to the spiritual principles in life. There's a certain anonymity and equality of all things that leads a person to question the difference. But it's specifically when we realize that the externalities look the same that we dig down deep to reveal the true difference, which is the choice to believe in the difference. Rav Hutner Schus Yogan Aleinu describes this very powerfully when it comes to Yom Kippur. We have a klal of two seirim, two goats. One gets sent to the Kodesh, one gets sent to be mukrav as a korban, and one gets sent to Azazel, to the desert, to assuage the demonic forces that seek to swallow up Klal Yisrael. Very strange, very, very difficult to understand, and very distant way of understanding how Hashem runs the world. But nevertheless, we have this strange phenomenon that one goes to Kodesh and one goes to the Azazel. And Dr. Footner, when you look at the Mishnah in Yoma and you look at the Gemara in Yoma, what you come to find is that these sheep, these goats, need to be exactly equal. They need to be the same cost, the same height, they need to have the same weight. And if there's even the hair's breadth of a difference between the two of them, then they can't be chosen for either one of those avodos of that day. And then with the Goral, we choose which goat gets to go to the Beis HaMikdash and which goat basically goes to hell. And so Zak the Heiliger of Hutner, he says that very often we seem to assume that real differences are external differences. And so that theoretically you have no greater difference than one goat that goes to heaven and one goat that goes to hell. Kavyachol. One goat to the Kodesh and one goat to the Azazel. And you would think that there would be no greater external difference here. But it's specifically here when there's the greatest difference imaginable that the Torah forces us to ensure that the details externally are exactly the same. Why? Because it's only when they're exactly the same that I force myself to come and understand the true difference. The true difference which can't be seen by the naked eye. The true difference, which is the fundamental shift in orientation that I have developed in my life by way of Emunah. And that's far greater than the external similarities. And this, as Rebbe Nachman says, is something that's fundamentally important to each and everything in a person's life. There's something that can be applied in every area of a person's life, where I have this expectation to feel a certain way, and then there's suddenly going to be a revelation that in truth, even though I don't feel that way, everything is still fine. It looks the same, but it's different fundamentally. And that's the secret of Akev. The Akev is the unfeeling heel. The Akev is that thing which hits the bottom most fiercely, most intensely. And it feels like nothing. And Ikvas at the Mashiach feels like nothing because it's so overwhelming. But the truth of the matter is that we have to believe. We have to believe in the difference. If we believe that our generation is different, if we believe that we're different, if we believe that this Tzaddik's Torah is different, then Mamela it becomes different, and that's where the true difference arises. And that's the secret of Vahaya Akev Tishma'un. It demands a very clear listening when it comes to those things that appear to be equal. The Akev, I can't feel any difference, but it's specifically there that we uncover the biggest difference. It's specifically there that we uncover the secret ability to have faith in the difference, even though we don't feel it. Does that make sense, Chevra?